Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about primary sources and how they can help bring social studies to life, specifically talking at an elementary level. Let's start with a photograph. You can see in the bottom right corner here. We're not sure if this photograph's from 1969 or 1970, but we get a time period idea. This photograph actually comes from our Fisher archives, and this is the Fisher campus in either 1969 or 1970. So as we take a look, it's pretty interesting. We can see some iconic buildings, like here's Kearney, that was the first building at Fisher, and the Ward and Haffey dorms. We have the Murray dorm here. Coming over to the other side of campus, we know this large lot that's right in front of Skolny, the science building. There's no pharmacy yet, but we do have Peoc next to Skolny and pieces of those classroom buildings. Now, my favorite place on campus and where I usually live is currently in this section. So this is where Lavery Library will be in just a few years after this photograph. And what we know of as LaChase Commons, or like the lawn between the classroom buildings and the library, used to be a small parking lot. So it's kind of interesting to look back at a piece of history that we all have some shared common knowledge about. If I go on to my next photo, here we know this photo is actually from May 1975, so we're looking at about 5 or 6 years later. And a lot of things look similar, but with one large addition, and that is here, Lavery Library. So we can see the main stairs coming down, and then into what we just saw in the last photograph as a parking lot is now what we call LaChase Commons. And since this photograph in 1975, campus has grown a lot. So we're going to talk today about what is a primary source. Both of those photographs we just looked at could be considered primary sources. We're going to talk about how you might use primary sources in your classroom and your teaching. I really like this. It leaves room for creativity and brainstorming and is a great way to engage students and connect them with the past. We're also going to talk about where you can access primary sources. It's not always as easy as just Googling it. A lot of primary sources are freely available online, but you have to know how to get to where they are available. They're not just going to turn up in your Google search. So let's start with what resources and links we offer through the library about where you can find primary sources. So I'm going to show you the research guide for this session. So we're going to get to the Lavery Library homepage. I'm going to scroll down on the homepage until I see that school bus for the K-12 Resource Center. And you're going to do this as well. You're going to have some time to explore in this module, and so you just want to remember how we got there. So from the Lavery Library homepage, you scroll down to the school bus, click that red button, and that will bring you here to the main School of Ed research guides. We're going to click Library Sessions, and then that opens up the different library sessions, and there's one here for primary sources. And here's our research guide. So we can see first what are primary sources. Primary sources are first-hand accounts, original manuscripts, records, or documents produced from the time period at hand, like those photographs we were just looking at. So some examples include, there's photographs, letters, maps, speeches, interviews, historical records, artwork, diaries. There's more and more. Now, a tricky one sometimes is newspaper articles. Newspaper articles from the time period would be considered primary sources, but if you see a newspaper article that is looking back on something like, it's the 50th anniversary of, that's not a primary source of what happened 50 years ago. It has to be from the actual time period. If you have some time, you're looking for some fun, this here is a fun little game, and it quizzes you on if you can tell the difference between a primary and secondary source. Secondary sources can get somewhat complicated. This game is a good one. As we scroll down, this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time today. You're going to take 15 or 20 minutes to explore around. You're going to click through some of these links. These are where to find primary sources online, and I'm going to highlight some of these throughout our time together in this module video. These are all websites online freely available. And I attempted to parse down this list. There's so many good places. These are some of the top ones I would recommend. You'll see some like New York Heritage, New York Historic newspapers take place here locally, as well as like the Rochester Digital Collections from the Monroe County Library System. If you're looking at a larger piece, you can go Library of Congress is nationwide, National Archives here, as well as if you're looking outside of the US, there's Eurodocs, and you'll see also that a lot of these links, like the Met, go to museums or go to libraries. So if you're looking at somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe you find a large museum, see what they offer digitally online. Going down, there's also online databases often include primary sources. So some of our K-12 online databases that we have, which would include primary sources, would be Culturegrams, Britannica School, and Research in Context, with little notes of how to get to the primary source pieces within those. Each of these can also be found right in Lavery's database A to Z list. And then the last piece is teaching with primary sources. There's some nice links here, getting started with primary sources. Library of Congress has some really quality materials. They also have classroom materials and primary source activities in that primary level classroom, which I really like. Smithsonian puts out an Engaging Students with Primary Sources. This is a PDF. I think it's about 60 pages long, but it talks about engaging students with primary sources. Just looking at the table of contents, you can see that they have some really great materials in here. So what are primary sources? Why do you use them? They go into documents, photographs, oral histories, different objects, and here's like tips for reading objects, where to find objects, analyzing objects. They give you an activity that you can do. And then how to introduce students to primary sources. This is a video of a teacher doing it in a classroom, and it's pretty well done. And then if you need, this links out to the slides that I'm using throughout this video. All right, so we have lots of links and sources and resources on this research page. We also have some great hard copy materials about either using primary sources, like these books on the right are in our teacher resources materials, and it talks about using primary sources in the classroom. We also have books that include photographs and different things. I love this collection of the then and now on different pieces, and these are housed in our nonfiction, or what we call our Dewey books, on the lower level of the library. I'm really hoping they update this series sometimes coming soon, because they're about 10 years old now, I believe. So the now piece is getting a bit outdated, but it's a fabulous series that would be great with like kindergarten, grades 1, grade 2. Photographs are powerful resources in K-12 classrooms and can be used to help learners engage with unfamiliar subjects and time periods, participate in critical discussions, and build their inference skills. So as you're thinking of how you might include a primary source within a lesson plan, or maybe it's your anticipatory set to get a lesson going and get those students engaged, this is some of the pieces you can think about. So here's an example of a picture, but usually I ask a class, what do you see here? What do you notice? So I'll brainstorm through this. Looks like we're in a classroom. It looks like a long time ago. I see cursive handwriting on the blackboard, probably with chalk behind. So already I'm thinking that's different from what I normally see in a classroom today. Mostly they're whiteboards that you'd use dry erase markers with. While there is a couple framed pictures on the walls are pretty bare. That's also very different from most classrooms I see today. The clothing, both for the teacher and for the students, is interesting to look at, very different from what we wear today. And standing right out to me is that there's a dog on the desk. If I go ahead and click this link, this primary source comes from the Library of Congress, which if I switch back to our research guide, was actually that first link here. And so once you click into Library of Congress, suggests our digital collections, or you can just search up here. Going back though, Here's our page. This is a classroom scene in Washington, D.C. public schools, and they're studying a live dog. So that makes sense why there's a dog on the desk. And if I look down a little bit, this part is interesting to me. The date created or published, 1899, and that has a question mark after it. Now, if I had been looking at this photo with maybe fourth graders, fifth graders, I'd say like, when do you think this photograph's from? I mean, we can tell it's from a long time ago, but how long ago? Any guesses and why? So there's different pieces you can look into. If I was doing this with first graders, I would change up my questioning. So what do you see here? Where are they? What are they doing? Right? How is it different from our classroom that we're sitting in right now? Different ways we can look into this. Look at the link on the very bottom here. You can see that I took these questions from pbs.org, and it's about analyzing primary sources. So you're not going to go through every question listed here, but based on what you're looking at, this will give you some ideas of how to start examining those photos and start some of the thinking and the discussion with students. Here's some other ideas. And this comes from a textbook that used to be used in this course, I believe. So here's an idea. You could show students two pictures and ask them to put the picture from the longest time ago on their left and the one that's closest to now on their right. And then there's some pictures that you could look into. How do you know that one picture is the oldest? Was it easy or hard to do? Which pictures do you think is most interesting? You could pick one picture and ask, how do you think your life would have been different if you had been alive at this time? So take that classroom one we just looked at. That would be an interesting question for that. You can also select a collection of primary source materials that present varying perspectives and insights as they relate to a common historical theme, event, or issue. So maybe you're looking at a time period in history and you can find primary sources from whether it's different countries or just different, maybe it's political beliefs or whatever you want to do, and talk about the different perspectives there. Looking at this first one about taking two pictures, and one's from longer ago. So here's one picture, and then here's the next picture. And talk about the differences. Maybe there's also some similarities. Both of these photos are of the Rutgers football team, but you can see how long ago they're from, or like apart from one another. The one on the left is from 1891. And I found that in the Library of Congress, searching their digital records. And the one on the right is the Rutgers football team from 2016, and I got that from an article from New York Times. And so for that one, I did just Google to find a more recent one. And I think it would be interesting to walk students through or have them do it on their own and then share out, looking at this picture on the left, some of the things we notice that's different from what we know today about football. Here's an example I'm going to do. In fourth grade curriculum in New York State, they study the Erie Canal. So if we're looking at Erie Canal, I'm going to first click this link for New York Heritage. And if we flip back before I do so to our research guide, New York Heritage is here. It's one of the links. So I'm going to click this link. What I did to get here was I did in their search the collection search box, I searched Erie Canal, and then there's a collection that we can explore. So I'm going to explore this collection about working on the Erie Canal. And this is going to link me to all of their materials that fit that search. And so I can see right now, it looks like there are 26 items, and I could filter it by year. I could filter it by their different collections that they have. So here is receipt of payment of passage for 5 people. So if we click that, I can see this is from Albany in 1837. And I think I can zoom in. Yeah, there we go. They've uploaded these digitally so that you can zoom in and it's still very clear, which is great. I would love to have some students look into this, like, what does it say? Is it hard to read and why? How much did it cost them for 5 people to ride on the canal? Let's look at what's happening in the visuals that I can see on here. Now what I want to do, so remember in this one we had 26 items and there's different types of items. Here, this one looks like a photograph. What I want to do now is remember that while I found 26 items in our New York Heritage Collection, there's different places that, again, I can't just Google. I need to actually go to the place and then search within their digital collections. So let's go to Library of Congress, which I pulled up a little bit earlier, and I'm going to search Erie Canal there. So here's Library of Congress, loc.gov. This is just their main homepage. And I'm going to search in quotation marks to keep my two words together, Erie Canal. So now instead of 26 items, it looks like we have over 9,000 items. So see, it depends on where you go, right? Library of Congress is going to be much larger than New York Heritage's collection. So what I suggest here is if we know what we want, like audio could be really cool. Here's a photo of a canal lock. Okay, and talk about like how does this work? And then I know my dad was a fourth grade teacher in the Rochester area, and they used to take a field trip to an Erie Canal lock. And so it'd be cool to like look at this ahead of time, learn about it, and then go see it. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you take your field trip, you go see the lock, and then you come back and look at this photo and talk about like what did we see and how do we see it here, right? Here's a photograph from the time. Does it look the same as what we saw today out there? And I think if we scroll down, yeah, then you get some information here. I'm going to flip back to our New York Heritage Digital Collection because I want to show you something they have in here. So I'll click to get back to their homepage. If we look at organizations, I believe that Fisher is going to be one of them. There it is. We contribute what we have in our special collections to this website. And what's really cool is these are all of our collections. One of the ones we get calls from all over the world about are our Frederick Douglass pieces. So we have Frederick Douglass's paper. We also have the North Star. But what's nice about this is you can click into either of these, explore the collection, and we have digitized every newspaper copy we have of, in this case, the Douglass papers. And they are, so you could even search by keyword in these and it'll pull up just the pieces that have those words. But if we click into one, I'll show you, they've been uploaded. Yeah, and this is how it really looks. We're trying to just preserve it as best we can right now. It's upstairs. The humidity is kept at a certain level. They're kept between special sheets to like maintain what we have. But what's so cool is now, because it's digitized, anyone can get to these freely anywhere at any time. And while the physical copy is kind of deteriorating, these will be kept digitized for a really long time. Now, if we pop this out, we can actually zoom in. So if I had done a keyword search, the word would be highlighted on here. But you can see it's Rochester in 1851. All right, this book, it is a historical fiction book, and it's called Mr. Lincoln's Whiskers. It's about a true story that happened. There's this little girl, and she saw a picture of Mr. Lincoln, as she called him. This was before he was president. Now, some of her family wanted to vote for Abraham Lincoln to become the next president, and some of her family did not. So she decided that she would write a letter to Mr. Lincoln, and she basically tells him, more of my family want to vote for you if you had whiskers on your face. And so basically she was saying, if you grow a beard, people take you more seriously, and then they're going to want to vote for you for president. And it's the little girl speaking. So she sends a letter to him, and she waits and waits. She goes to the post office and keeps waiting for him. Well, then it turns out that Mr. Lincoln sends her letter back and is coming through her hometown. And then when she meets him, he says, how do you like the improvement you advised me to make? And here he's grown a beard, he's got the top hat on. So these are like the iconic pieces of Abraham Lincoln that we know of him. And then the back of the book, here's a copy of the actual letter that Grace sent to Mr. Lincoln. And then here is the letter that Abe Lincoln wrote back to Grace. And so the question is this nonfiction book that's based on a true story, is it a primary source? So the answer would be this book itself is not a primary source, right? This was published much later than that time period actually happened with Grace and Abe Lincoln. But what is a primary source is the digital copy of the actual letters that they sent. These would be considered primary sources, and these are included in the back of the book. And now these are housed in a public library. So, just popping back to our research guide a little bit more, I want to point out here Social Studies Central is a conglomerate, but here, favorite five, Library of Congress, that's what I started with as well. National Archives, Digital Classrooms, also on our list. The next three are not, so you could always check that out. I like how they give their top five, because you'll see as you scroll through, these are all different places that they're linking out to look for primary sources. So all their whole link here is like, again, what I tried to piece together of like these would be my top go-tos that I would recommend. You can look at our Monroe County digital collections. These are through our public library service here, and you can search in their different collections. Okay, so you can go through the different things here, go through the databases. Today, we talked about what is a primary source. I want you to keep thinking about how you might use primary sources in your classroom and in your teaching, and you're going to brainstorm about that in a brief reflection in the discussion board. And where can you access primary sources? So again, go back to that research guide. I'm going to pop into Blackboard now. So after watching this video overview, I want to point out these last two pieces. Now I want you to take 15 to 20 minutes and explore 3 or 4 different links on that research guide. And then you're going to come back and make a post in the discussion board answering these pieces. So what topics and keywords did you use when exploring today? I suggest if you have your lesson plan topic to just explore that. Use some of the pieces that match with your lesson plan. Which resources did you explore in the 15 to 20 minutes, and what types of resources did you find? And then there's some leading questions here if you want to include within that piece. How might you use primary sources in your future classroom and teaching? And then what was your favorite piece you learned in this module today? And that would be it. I'm going to read your responses and reply back, and I look forward to hearing what you all write and what you think. Thanks, everybody.